Get a drill.
Freedom is very fragile. It's more fragile when we don't know the truth. You're about to be part of FramersView, where truth is the foundation of every day's program. Join us live every weekday right here on Rumble at 1 p.m. Eastern. Now, here's Neil Frame on FramersView.
Boy, if there's anything you'd like to know, just put it in there in your chat, and I'll be happy to comment. Hey, I've mentioned once or twice. Okay, I mention all the time, vote, and that's a little dangerous, right? Because we've got two situations. One is that they vote for the right people, and one they vote for the wrong people, and then you have the problem with who's controlling the votes. I'm covering a lot of that today. Because it really does make a difference. In every respect, it makes a difference. But there's something that's just happened with the SAVE Act. We're going to get right to that here in just a few minutes. Graham Plattner, if you ever wanted to have an example of somebody that was running for office that you'd say, this person doesn't have a chance. And then they do. And you go, how did that happen? I mean, even Kamala Harris, everybody said not a chance. And it turned out not a chance. I think in this case, I think Plattner will end up being the candidate, which is scary. And knowing what I know about Maine, beautiful state, I once got the opportunity to drive all the way, I think it's called Kent, Maine, which is as far north as you can go without falling into a river that then becomes Canada, and drove from Portland, Maine, all the way up there. And it is desolate. Everything's down south, not everything, but a big share of it is down south. But it's great people, interesting folks, and that's, I see some of these viewers. We're going to cover that today. Some of the not viewers are voters, and what they say, and it's like, how did you come up to this with Plattner? It's crazy. We're going to cover some fraud things today that are really important to cover. Mike Lee, who is one of the really brilliant Republicans, he's from Utah. There's been talk about him being a possible nominee for the next Supreme Court position. Just super smart. And he talks a lot about the SAVE Act. I got a good piece about that. And then racism. That you may say, really, are we going to talk about that again? Yeah, because there's things coming up that in the sports world that this racism issue is popping up again. And sometimes you might want to say to yourself, maybe we don't want to go this far. Maybe we don't want to call our lawyer and start this racism thing again. We're going to cover some of that. And then, maybe we'll get into the Whoopi thing, because Whoopi has said something that's really pissed off of the other people in the View. So First of all, today, I want to talk about this LA situation, LA and California in general. So now we know, number one, we know that Bass, uh, uh, yeah, uh, Bass and Ramen Noodles is going to be the two candidates. I say Ramen Noodles because their last name is Ramen. Are going to be the candidates. Both Democrats, really not even a Democrat with Ramen because she's a total socialist communist and a loser as a council person. I just don't understand how these people vote. But then you ask yourself, how does this vote get counted? I have no proof because no one has any proof about what's really going on there. Are there fraud issues? Are people playing games with these numbers? Is there insanity that goes beyond insanity with the vote that if it's postmarked on the day of the election, you have 7 more days before we make an announcement? And who's controlling that? And maybe there's nothing. I'm going to give them maybe there's nothing. But with everything that happens, why aren't we suspicious? And we are. We're suspicious because we've seen what has happened. The January 6th issue, which I'm hesitating to get into, but there's a new video that came out that's about 3 minutes that throws up a whole bunch of question about what happened with that January 6th hearing TV show that had all Democrats, including the Democrat Liz Cheney and whatever his name was, the crying baby Republican. They had those two there because they hate Trump, and it worked out. And everybody decided, yeah, he's guilty, he being Trump. This is what happens with the votes, and it really is concerning. It's concerning in two ways. It's concerning that people are getting away with putting things out there. I spent about 12 minutes in law school, and the rest of the time I slept. But the point is, there is a rule that the Democrat, in this case, and the Republican gets the same information. And in the case of the accused and the prosecution, those people both get all the information. Well, they weren't allowed to get all the information. And we know that when I say they weren't, the defense for the J6ers didn't get an opportunity to put the entire case out there because the information wasn't there. It was held back. And then Benny Thompson, I think it is, after it was all over, they destroyed the evidence because nobody would care. That's the first breaking of the law you can imagine. So it should worry all of us of how we are, where we are today. I had on my screen here a little while ago this SPLC thing. They're doing a hearing. Of course, the Democrats, oh my God, it just yap, 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 yap. And we have evidence of what they've done. But they're going to just push everything back and lie so that there's sound bits that people can put out there on the Democrat news networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, MS Now, to be able to put all that information out there for people who are unwilling to look at anything else. And they hear that and they're going to run down the streets saying, oh my God, Trump is this, and the SPLC is being crucified by the Republicans, and there's no reason for them to do that. But there is. There is. And that's where we are today. That's why I say voting makes a difference. And before I get into this SAVE Act, I want to just say this. You know, when I was a kid, and I was at one point, I had Democrat parents, and they were Democrat parents because a lot of people were, because they went through what was the Depression. And everybody thought that the Depression was resolved and solved by Roosevelt. That could be questioned. But the Depression was a real thing. And fortunately, my grandfather was in the restaurant business, had a bunch of diners, and he made money during that period of time because amazingly, you could eat cheaper in a restaurant than you could at home in a lot of cases. And then it was the supply issues. And so all these problems that occurred caused people to become Democrats and vote Democrat. So my parents never talked about politics. When I was a kid, boy, this is going to age me. It was Eisenhower, it was Kennedy, and on from there. I was I was born in the 50s, and Eisenhower, who was a five-star general, supreme commander of the Allied force, U.S. and Allied forces, big deal, and then became president. And a lot of people pushed back on that. And was he a great president? You know what? As a kid, I didn't know anything. Uh, Probably not the greatest president ever, but he was at least seemed like relatively honest. And today, everybody that listens to this show, if they listen to it on YouTube or on Rumble or wherever you get this show, if you listen to it in your earbud while you're driving, please don't watch it. But if you're listening to it, you're driving down the road. It's big part of it is because of Eisenhower, a Republican. And then a Democrat got in, and that was Kennedy. And everybody was excited about, that was, the Camelot issue was the press built that up and just pushed it all the way through. And then, of course, Kennedy was assassinated. Why did that happen? The reason that happened is not because of the press, but because he did the same thing that Reagan did. He did the same thing that Trump is doing. And that is, he stood up to the enemy. He stood up to Russia. He stood up to Cuba, Bay of Pigs. Now, you could say, well, then you're supporting a Republican or a Democrat. And my answer to that would be, if you took Kennedy today and he was running for office based on what his beliefs were, he'd be a Republican. Now, Johnson, who many people, conspiracy theory goes through the roof. A lot of people thought that Johnson was a big part of getting Kennedy assassinated, and the CIA, and the this and the that, and the that and this. The chances of Lee Harvey Oswald shooting out, and I've been there, shooting out through that window and picking Kennedy off is slim to none. The evidence that didn't get out on that is the same thing. So why do I talk about this? Because voting matters. The people that control these things, the Warren Report and the people that were on the Warren Report, and the evidence that wasn't given out. These are all things that today, when we look at this, and I just looked up at the screen because I turned it off, forgot I turned that off. I've got monitors everywhere here. The issues that occur today have to do with voting. If we hadn't gotten Reagan in office, what would Jimmy Carter have accomplished or not accomplished and destroyed even more of this country if the voters hadn't voted for Reagan? And then you can look at the issue of just Trump winning in 2016, taking office in January of 2017. And the Congress, and when I say Congress, I'm talking Senate and House, who went after Trump in every way, shape, and form they could. This is what we have today. We have to worry about a person like Hakeem Jeffries taking control of the House and being the Speaker of the House, and the votes matter. And so when we see a guy like Plattner that could become a senator, a guy that had a swastika on his chest, he's covered it up with another tattoo. That doesn't absolve him from it. These are the things we all should be going, how and why? Why has anybody voted for him? We're going to show a couple things and you just go, is that really your criteria? So, some good news. You might be saying to yourself, it's hopeless. We might as well just shoot ourselves in the head. Don't. We sound like Biden now. Don't. There are hopes. There are chances. So today, literally today, the SAVE Act, which is the Voter ID Act, has become real again. And how could that be? How could that possibly be? Look at this. This is interesting. Trump's Save America Act shows signs of life in the Senate despite Republican revolt. The Senate Republicans have struggled to move the ball on President Donald Trump's voter ID and citizenship verification bill, but a late night vote in the upper chamber breathed some life into an issue once thought dead. 4 Republicans, Senators Susan Collins from Maine, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, Mitch McConnell, what a loser, from Kentucky, and Tom Tillis, another loser, voted against it. Now, that was in the previous vote. Their defection prevented the bill from even getting 50 votes, a prerequisite for success if Republicans were to launch a talking filibuster. But Lisa attempts did hit 50 votes, with Collins flipping her vote to support the original version of the Save America Act. This is a big deal, you guys. This is massive. What this means is that with the 50 votes, we can get this vote to be, there's a couple of things that go with this. I'm going to show you Mike Lee. I mentioned Mike Lee. I'm going to show you Mike Lee here in a moment, because what they've done, what their purposes were to get the 50 votes, which then we would have 51 with our good friend J.D. Vance. And we can get this passed. We can get this through the Senate. Now, how will that work? That will force a talking filibuster. And we'll get into this with Mike Lee here in a minute. Understand, we've allowed filibusters to just be an ongoing, going on forever, just nobody does anything. This would force the Democrats to speak until they can't speak anymore, whether it takes days or weeks, but it would keep us from having to kill the filibuster, which is a bad idea. Killing the filibuster is a bad idea. But if we can eliminate it and get the SAVE Act done, it will create a solution to be able to have legal ID and stop what's going on. So I want to get into showing what Mike Lee talks about and how we can make it so that people are going to have to vote as citizens of the United States and not have dead people, illegal aliens, criminals, everything else that's going on. Watch this first clip with Mike Lee talking to Kayleigh McEnany on Fox News.
Yeah, look, it sounds to me like AOC is coming awfully close to endorsing the plan to nuke the zombie filibuster, and then pass the Save America Act. Look, there are a couple ways that you can accomplish this. One, of course, is to continue to debate until every senator has either physically exhausted themselves or until every senator has exhausted his or her right to speak under the Senate rules. Then you call the question at a simple majority. The other approach is to just nuke the filibuster and do the whole thing at 51 from the outset. Look, I strongly prefer the first option, but either way, we've got to get to the question on this because, Kayleigh, Americans overwhelmingly support the need for voter ID. They overwhelmingly support the need to verify citizenship from those registered to vote in this country. The Save America Act would make sure that both of those pieces are taken care of. That's why the overwhelming majority, a supermajority of Republican voters, of Democrat voters nationwide, want this passed and even want it passed before the midterm elections. And that cuts across the board in people of both political parties. The only place where this is even remotely controversial is in the halls of Congress, with Democrats in the halls of Congress.
So this is just the point. The only people that are against this are the Democrats in politics. And why would that be? Well, not just them, but the blue states that have illegal voter registration, has a bunch of dead people, as like I said, and illegals that are voting. You know, when you give out a driver's license to people that are illegal so they can drive and get a job, then they can walk in with their ID and vote. But they're not voters. They're not Americans. I have nothing against people who are here working. You know, when I get my roof done, nobody's speaking English because it's a hard job. If you go to a horse farm, most people at the horse farm are mostly Mexicans. If you go to Florida, it's a lot of Guatemalans. There's a lot of people that are really good with that tool, or that trade rather. They can do those things that Americans don't want to do. It's hard. So do I have a problem with them being able to be here and provide work that a lot of our American people won't do? I really don't. But they're not legal to vote. And if they claim they're paying taxes and they don't have a green card, and they claim that, do they have a social security number? And how did they get that? How in the world did they get a social security number if they're not a citizen? Are they going to get benefits when they retire and they're not even Americans? These are questions you should ask, because those of you who are watching this show right now that are paying attention to what I'm saying, are paying for those benefits. Those of us that are on Medicare at this point want to see Medicare and Medicaid to be there for people who need it. But if we keep breaking it by letting people use these benefits that aren't Americans, we're just stupid. So the second piece of this Save America Act and of the vote as a legal citizen of the United States is the lies that come from Democrats. And there's a lot of that. And one of our greatest liars of all time is Kamala Harris. Watch this, and then Mike will address it. Mike Lee. Watch this.
The SAVE Act that they keep pushing. So what that would do is, for new registrants to vote, to prove your identity, you'd have to have a birth certificate or a passport. Well, passports cost at least $100 to get. So can you say poll tax?
Is it a poll tax to check IDs?
Absolutely not. A poll tax is something you have to pay in order to be able to vote. Obviously, Kamala Harris hasn't read the Save America Act. If she had read it, she would see that on page 12, starting at line 22, we make provisions for people who can't find their documents, never had them to begin with, or had their documents eaten by their dog or burned to the ground by an invading vandal. And it says that all you have to do, if you don't have any documents, you fill out the basic facts surrounding your birth. And if you're a natural-born citizen, establish the circumstances that entitle you to birthright citizenship. If you're naturalized, then you'd write out a basic affidavit establishing roughly when and where and how you became naturalized as a citizen.
This is a really good point here. You know, they make it sound like it's just impossible. You know, I couldn't find my birth certificate, and I needed to get that. And so I called Indiana, where I'm from, where I grew up, and I said, "Hey, I've misplaced my birth certificate." And you know, it was so simple. They asked me to give them some information. What's my social security number? You know, what date was I born? You know, where was I born? What hospital was I born in? Now, I said, well, what if I don't know the hospital? Because I'm not positive. And they said, well, that's just part of our vetting to be able to make sure we've got the right person. And I said, okay. I said, well, and I was pretty sure where it was. And it seemed like they asked one other question. It was like general stuff you would know. And then they said, do you know the address of where you lived when you were born? And I did, where I lived for 18 years before I moved away from home. And so they said, okay, you're all set. We'll have this to you within, I think they said 10 days or 2 weeks. Done. All these states have that. You know, if you've got a social security number, they can find you. It's not that hard. It's pretty simple. They can find you, bada bing, bada boom. So that's great, but the problem still lies out there in front of us. And here's what that is. We still have a whole bunch of people that are voting that aren't even alive, that are voting that are not legals, that are, you know, they're in federal law, unless that's changed. And in my back of my mind, I was thinking about this just before the show started. If you've got a felony count against you, you can't vote any longer. Seemed like they changed that, which would be a little stunning in itself, but it's bad enough just the dead people and the illegals. That's millions of people. A million people can make a big difference in an election. A big difference. And a good example of that would be in the 2000 election with Al Gore and George W. Bush. It was very close. And the Chads made a difference, and thank God that West Virginia went in Trump's way. Or could God, Al Gore would have been president. As I think of that, as I just said that, I'm like, I think that might be as bad as Kamala Harris. What a blithering idiot he was. He's proven that. So watch this final cut with Mike Lee talking about the registrations of people that are registered to vote in states, and blue states and red states.
One has to wonder, Kaylee, whether those states have something to hide, whether they're worried that maybe what they'll discover is that they've got a whole lot more registered voters than they do voting age members of their own population. Perhaps in some of these states, they've become addicted to the idea that not only do they have registered non-citizens or registered dead people on their rolls, but they also allow ballot harvesting and routinely have people coming through and collecting these by the dozens, if not by the hundreds or the thousands, filling them out and then submitting them en masse in order to rig the outcome of elections. This is why we need the Save America Act, not only to preserve the security of our elections, but also the perception of the security of our elections. Increasingly, Democrats deny that election fraud happens. And yet, Kaylee, that thing that they say never happens, it has a way of happening a lot, and we keep uncovering more and more evidence that it's occurring.
So leveling the field, right? We have to somehow level the field. This isn't about, we got to make it fair so the Republicans can win. Because in a big share of the states in the United States, Republican registration is larger as far as declared Republican or Democrat or independent. The Republicans have more people. It's what those numbers are. You go to California, you go to Washington State, Oregon, New York, probably not. You get out of New York City, you get out of LA, you get out of Seattle, get out of Colorado. Well, I'm not getting out of Colorado. I love the state. I hate what goes on here. But the point is, you have these little pockets that are so liberal. I was listening this morning to Fox News, and they were talking about the fact that if Steve Hilton is running against Becerra for governor of California, he probably doesn't have a chance. My dog doesn't like it either, but probably doesn't have a chance because there's just more Democrats that are registered in California, unless you get rid of the illegals and the dead people and all that. So this is really important. Very, very important. So with that said, and knowing where we are today, there's just so much ugliness that's going on. And because people don't trust things. Now, I got to tell you, I'm looking at the whole process of this Maine situation with Plattner. How did he become the candidate? How in the world did this guy become a candidate for senator out of Maine? I mean, please, somebody explain that to me. And I think the answer is that the only way it happened was that there was some real stupid stuff that occurred, or they don't have anybody else, or they said, we've got to make it even more crazy than Susan Collins, who's not been one of our best Republicans. It's still better. And she isn't crooked. She just has weird ideas. But watch this. These are the two people that started getting Plattner into the candidacy for Senate. Not only did they do that, but what about being able to determine if this person is good? How did they investigate his background? This is going to open your eyes big time with these two morons. And her giggling and him, the way he talks, is just, he has about as much backbone as a snake. Watch this.
At this point, you hadn't vetted Graham Plattner. You hadn't done a full scrub of who he is. How did you go about vetting him? And why did you?
We paid a nice firm a whole chunk of money and got some stuff back. Some of what you've seen on the news we got back. Other stuff we didn't.
Did the vetting process turn up the tattoo that became so controversial?
No.
The Reddit posts, did that turn up in the vetting process?
The firm sent us a thing, and it had some of the posts, but it didn't have all of them.
And what did you think about that? How did you think your way through the fact that he had posted these things on social media?
I said none of this will or should stop him from becoming a U.S. Senator.
And what was your thinking there?
Agree. I think if what the voters wanted were people who were grown in vats and had never done or said anything that they might regret their entire lives, we'd have a very different country. Part of our thesis here is that people do not want their candidates grown in vats. They want people who are real human beings, and they want people who do not look and sound like the vat-grown people who've been leading this country off a cliff for the last century. And that was Graham.
Jesus, did somebody have a hold of his squeakers? Or does somebody have a gun to his head? Oh my God. I mean, laughing about how bad the vetting was, they don't regret it. You can tell that. this makes me crazy. In an election for a senator of the United States, 1 of 50, 2 of your state, 6-year term. Think about that. You would have 6 years with Plattner if he wins. And they say, well, no, we didn't know about the tattoo. Really? Well, yeah, there were some things from Reddit that we heard about when they were vetting him, but we don't really know, when they were investigating who he was and what he did and what his background was. No, we didn't know about that. Oh, come on. This isn't serious. Now, what I can guess, what I can tell you I think happened was, first of all, Graham Plattner comes from big money with his family. He's not a poor kid like everybody wants to say. He's a spoiled brat. That's number one. Number two, and probably more importantly than that, this guy is not just a brat, but in the very military service that he served in, all he can do is talk negatively about it. They should have known that, and you would think, when you're vetting a candidate to be representing a state for the United States of America, 1 of 50, that you wouldn't want to have somebody that's crazy against, talking badly about heroes in the military, talking badly about the military itself, supporting so many crazy things. You'd go, yeah, no, this guy isn't going to work out. Let's find somebody else. And are you going to tell me that there's nobody else? I've got an old friend. I haven't talked to him in years. I think he's a Democrat. They should have got him for a senator candidate. Dana would be happy for me saying that, because I don't think he'd do it. My point is that there's other people out there that wouldn't have to just try to cover up everything. He keeps saying there's nothing else coming out. Nothing else. Everything's good. Everything's good from now on. Don't worry about it. Be happy. And yet he could win. And yet he could win. Now, I don't think of Maine as a flaming liberal blue state like California, Washington State, Oregon. They're just not. It's more purple. But the Portland group, can't think of the state capital, Albany, those states, and Bahaba, that area, Ellsworth area, they're big time liberals. And that's where the votes are. Did I mention to you that once you get a little bit north in Maine, there's nobody out there? So watch this wonderful woman talking about why she's supporting Plattner.
Totem pole tattoo, the Nazi tattoo. How do you kind of?
Somebody said that they talked to somebody who had seen one of those or wore one of those, and it was silver, and it didn't even occur to him that it was the same thing. I think people are making as much of it as they can because they don't have a lot of substance around anything else. And if they did, we'd hear about it, believe me. They are trolling for dirt.
What if he had like a Israeli flag tattoo or something? Would that be a deal breaker?
For me?
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah.
That would be
Israeli? Yeah, because I don't support genocide, and he doesn't either. And that would show that he was being inconsistent. And he's been very consistent about that. Straight across the board.
Oh my God. When you are so incapable of really thinking things through, that you would actually say, but he didn't really know what it was, being the swastika. I don't know how this is possible. I really don't. a guy that's a supporter of the Nazis, who used to say he was, is not anymore because he had to change his story. A person that talks the way he does about our American military. A person that abuses his wife, has a number of women saying what they've said about him. Now, I'm going to be the first one to say, there's been people that have said things about Trump. We know about E. Jean Carroll, and now that's starting to blow up on her. Those things happen. Blasey Ford, when they were going after Kavanaugh to be a Supreme Court justice. All of these things happen, but there's some credible information that we've seen, and I've tried to find anything that would crush the credibility of these women that are making these statements about Graham Plattner. It's really scary. And where will we be? And will Susan Collins be able to win? Well, we just saw her make a decision to vote for having the SAVE Act go through. And she did that right at the very end before the primary elections. And why did she do that? It's a pretty easy answer. She's tried to hold on to as many Democrats as she could, talk to as many of them as she could, and then she made a calculated decision. I need to do what I know I need to do. I think that's what it is. So this is a big deal. I spent pretty much 40 minutes talking about just elections and voting. And there's a reason for that. It's that important. And I'm going to give you another example. It's not about voting, but is the result of voting that makes a huge difference. And that's these fraud cases. The fraud that's occurring in many states, and it's not just blue states, but it's blue mayors in red states. It's blue states. It's all over the place, and people aren't really paying much attention to it. Well, Unleashed Prosperity, which is one of my favorite newsletters, Stephen Moore and Art Laffer and a number of other people that are part of that, they dig deep into things. And so they had a piece about the whistleblowers regarding the fraud that was going on in Minnesota, and how it's very clear that Walls and Ellison and a few other people, including our good little friend Ilhan Omar, are out there getting away with saying they had nothing to do with this, when we pretty well know they had something to do with this. So the testimonies are a big deal, and there's some highlighted points that I want to point out here, because here again, voting matters, because people that would care about this aren't in office in Minnesota, in California, and Ohio's been talked about a lot. There's people that aren't paying attention there also. And I'm sure J.D. Vance is not happy about that. And Ramaswamy, if he gets in, may or may not, it's hard to know. He's going to make a difference with this fraud stuff. Take a look at this. A testimony from nearly 30 whistleblowers, state employees, and participants in the program is damning. Here are key findings from the report. Governor Walz and Attorney General Ellison were aware of credible and systemic fraud in Minnesota's social services program as early as 2019, but failed to take action to protect taxpayer funds. Minnesota state agencies had clear authority to suspend or stop payments to providers suspected of fraud without requiring independent direction from courts, law enforcement agencies, or the federal government, but they failed to act. The Minnesota officials continued directing taxpayer dollars to feeding our future and other high-risk entities, despite identifying serious program deficiencies, enabling hundreds of millions of dollars in federal fraud funds to flow to fraudsters. The Walz administration retaliated against state employees who raised concerns about fraud. while senior state officials prioritize managing political and media fallout over addressing known fraud vulnerabilities. And finally, the failure to prevent fraud resulted in an estimated 300 million in federal children nutrition funds being lost and potentially 9 billion. Can I repeat that for you just in case you missed it? Potentially 9 billion in Medicaid related funds to be lost or placed at serious risk. This is where we are today. This is what's happening in Minnesota. Minnesota. It's happening in Ohio. It's definitely happening in California. And I would bet that with all of the things that go on in all states, and when you get power and you're not watched and there's not real oversight, money has a very dangerous effect on people. When they see they can make a bunch of money and nobody's watching with politicians, we've seen it over and over again. We've seen it with companies where the fraud occurs or embezzlement occurs. They go, 4 for them, 1 for me, 4 for them, 1 for me. And all of a sudden, the 1 for me becomes a big bunch of me. And I worry about that because fraud is taking money from the people that should be able to get it. And I was watching the news the other night with our local, the state election debates. And they're talking about how they're taking money away from Medicaid, from people that are getting Medicaid. Yeah, but they don't tell the whole story. They just tell a story. And a story for them is they're taking money from people that were getting Medicaid and, SNAP and all of the other benefits that they're getting. Well, what they're doing is they're stopping the fraud. And the Democrats don't like that. And so they're going to fight that in any way that they possibly can. So while it continues, and we know that it continues, that fraud that we're talking about just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger until somebody finally says, wait a minute, let's investigate this. And then people start backing up. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to Elon Omar and Tim Walz and Ellison. What's going to happen with these guys? Are they going to have to be responsible? We'll find out. So, Brooke Rollins made some comments that I really want you to see about this fraud, and then we'll move on.
In a letter to every governor in America, no one had ever held the states accountable. The federal government funds the food stamp program. We send hundreds of millions of dollars a day to the states, but there'd never been a back-end accountability on how is that money getting spent. So we asked all the states to partner with us. It's time to have accountability. The red states, of course, did. And with that red state data, we found 200,000 dead people getting food stamps. We found 500,000 people that were getting more than one benefit. And y'all, this was in the red states. The blue states wouldn't give us the data. They're suing us. We're in massive litigation right now, looking to cut those funds off until they give us that data. But the fraud is so rampant and so stunning that when the president, the vice president, and our team talks about, when we can root all this fraud out, we're going to really be able to cut the deficit, make sure we're protecting the taxpayer, but also make sure we're protecting the families that rely on these programs at the same time and by getting the fraud out.
Get the fraud out, man. She's so right. So what I was talking about before this, she's made it very clear. This Medicaid and the food stamps, SNAP, all these things that just go to anybody and everybody. If you're able to get up and move and walk and do things, even if you can't get up and move and walk, if you can work, you should be working and not taking money from people that really deserve it. I would like to see the people that actually deserve it be able to get a little bit more to be able for them to be able to make it in life. those people that deserve it. And that's the key. I don't know. Will it ever happen? If we can keep the Dems out of power coming up in this election in 26, here in 26 in November, if we can manage that, we have the opportunity to continue working on this fraud and getting things straightened out. And then we have to get candidates that are good people that will make a difference to stop the fraud and do good oversight. I've got another story that I want to share with you, and I'm going to truncate it a little bit because it was going to take a little bit more time. But it's about racism, and it's about NFL. And you're going to say, well, why are we talking about the NFL when, hockey's just ending and baseball's going on and basketball championships are going on and blah, blah, blah? Well, because what are we? We're in June, July, August. We got a month and a half, 2 months before the first NFL games, preseason games start. And I want to bring this up because this is why hate begins. Because stories go out that aren't true or realistic. So there's a guy named Brian Flores who was the coach of Miami. I'm not a big fan of Miami. I'm a Denver boy, so Broncos are my team. But if you're a coach and you lose a job, I can tell you, and we're going to have evidence of this, you're going to lose your job as the head coach of a football team sooner than later. It's the way it works. But then this story was brought on by, ready? Al Sharpton. Watch this.
As the number of black head coaches who survived this current NFL season with their jobs intact has dropped down to just one, drawing criticism from black fans. As one black former head coach addressed his own grievances against the league with a potentially historic lawsuit. He joins me now, former NFL head coach Brian Flores and his attorney, John Eleftherakis.
Eleftherakis, yes.
Eleftherakis. I always get your name wrong, John, as long as I know
it's
you.
Okay, Rev.
Thank you both for joining us here tonight. And certainly we appreciate it coming in live. I have to start with some added context for our audience who might not follow football. This week, you filed a federal suit against the NFL, contending that in addition to a pattern of racial discrimination across the league, you say in the lawsuit that your most recent employer, the Miami Dolphins, asked you to intentionally lose games against your will, while two others, the New York Giants and Denver Broncos, effectively used their interviews with you to check a box on diversity, manipulating the NFL's own rules to close the gap. In a league that's still about 60 to 70% black as far as players, but has never had more than 20% black head coaches.
Yeah, okay. So if it's Al Sharpton, yeah, here you go. So Brian Flores is going after the NFL at the same time that he's trying to get another job at the NFL. And I've got some information here. I don't know if you guys know, there's a new thing called AI. They just came up with it. Somebody invented it. They found out that the letters A and I could mean something, and they found that there was intelligence. It was kind of artificial, and they all of a sudden went, wait a minute, we could call it artificial intelligence. And then maybe we can make it so that it'll give us information really quickly. Yeah. So here's the record of the Miami Dolphins since 2012. 7-9, 8-8, 8-8, 6-10. That's win-loss records. 6-10, I said that. 10-6, and then back to 6-10, 7-9, 5-11, 10-6, 9-8. Now, that might surprise you that those aren't very good. But then you look at this even tells more story. So the black guy that's the coach, he's been unfairly treated. I played sports all my life. In most cases, you might have noticed I'm not a black guy. And you might, well, you can't tell by looking, but I'm not the biggest guy on the planet. And most of the guys I played with were bigger than me, stronger than me, and black because they're better athletes. And I never had a problem with that. And I truly grew up in one of the racist states you could be in at the time, which was Indiana. And Ku Klux Klan was one of the biggest ones in Indiana at the time. And I couldn't care less. There were a bunch of guys I was playing sports with. Basketball, baseball, football, everything. And so here's the point of this. 2012 to 2015. 2012, 7-9, 8-8, 8-8, 6-10. Joe Philbin got fired. 2016 to 2018, Adam Gase, 10-6, 6-10, 7-9, got fired. Brian Flores, he was this is when he was a coach from 19 to 21. So 5-11, 10-6, 9-8. Owners say we're going to try again. Now, are they supposed to just dump this guy, or not dump this guy because he's black? Really? Aren't we supposed to have the best we can get? Now they're also claiming that, well, yeah, but he was interviewed by other companies, but that was just teams, but that was just to check a box. Boy, that irritates me. Watch this.
Representation matters. And there's just a lack of representation for black and minority coaches and executives, and just representation in leadership positions as a whole in the National Football League. And that's got to change. This lawsuit isn't about me. It's about that lack of representation. It's about the people and the generations that are going to come behind me.
Attorney, I mean, the facts are the facts. 32 teams, one black coach, no black owners, never was a black owner. And Flores is doing interviews for other jobs. He certainly didn't have to do this. So, I mean, when do they stop thinking they can just buy chicken dinners to groups and throwing money at so-called social justice groups that don't fight social justice and deal with the systemic problem in their league?
Well, Rev, now they're forced to deal with it because Coach Flores lent himself, his career, to this cause.
Okay, look, again, I know what they're trying to do here. I get it. I understand it. They're trying to make a story so that the lawsuit will work. Al Sharpton, not the sharpest Sharpton in the world, said there's never been a black owner. Well, Condoleezza Rice is one of the owners of the Denver Broncos. I'm pretty sure, maybe I should give her a call and ask her if she's qualified as a black person. Or maybe she's just doing it like Elizabeth Warren, claiming that she's an Indian. She just claims but what you can see. Oh yeah, so that is a black owner. And a number of other black owners. So once again, the story is not used, it's their story. Just to make this work. And Brian Flores, he may be a nice guy, but first of all, learn from the fact that these coaches, that this list that I have, these coaches come and go. When you're not winning, you're gone. And a great coach isn't always going to be successful because you got to have a team. You don't have a team, you're not going to win. And you're going to lose your job. That's the way it works. You look at the Dallas Cowboys back in the days when they were winning all the time, coaches lasted a long time. Boy, that doesn't happen very often anymore. And it's really difficult to make it work. So I bring that into the story because number one, they're suing the NFL because he lost his job. At the same time, he's being interviewed for other jobs. And I will say this, there are a number of guys that have been promoted to head coach and they failed. And they went back to become an offensive coach or defensive coach, a specialties coach, and they flourished. And they were for a long, long time, and they still are. There's a lot of those guys, and they realize I'm not a head coach. It's a different job. It's kind of like being a chief operating officer in a big corporation and being a CEO. It's a totally different game. It's politics, it's BS, and everything else you got to go through as a CEO. The COO goes through it somewhat as an operations guy, but guess what? Even though they go through some of that, it's a different job and it's a different skill set. You ask me, I'll rather be a chief operating officer any day over being a CEO. And I've been in both positions. And I've enjoyed both, but I've enjoyed operations way more. So that's where we are. And I felt like today we really had to spend time on this. And I thank you so much for being here. I'm trying to build up this audience. Not easy. We'll keep pushing as long as we can. But stay with me. We'll be back tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern time, just like we are each day this week here. And we'll give you more information. Until then, rock on.
Thanks for your support. Join the Framers View Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern.